Today, we have the pleasure of being joined by Renata Kowalczyk, CEO of Wilmington Alliance. As the Chief Executive Officer of Wilmington Alliance, she is focused on the organization on equitable economic mobility, bringing people together to drive innovative solutions, leverage resources, and promote opportunities to empower the city's residents and businesses. That is a little bit about Renata here, and we are going to go ahead and kind of get things kicked off here. But just to kind of level set and set expectations here. So you are going to see Renata and I kind of go back and forth. You can kind of expect our conversation to last 20 to 30 minutes, give or take. And then, like I mentioned earlier, after we're going to take some questions from you all. By the end of our time today, we hope that you all feel more comfortable and confident guiding your own organization in its use of data. And we absolutely live and breathe for this topic. And I'm very excited to learn more from Renata's experience and expertise here today. And I hope you all are as well. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into today's conversation. So, hi, Renata.
Hello, Ashley. The day has come that we get to have a conversation with so many folks. I am really geeking out on the locations of all the participants. We truly have across the United States joining. That's awesome, including someone, Ellen from Queens, New York, where I used to live for many, many years.
Love it. I know it's always fun seeing where everyone is at. I always have to take a peek. But thank you so much for joining us, Renata. I want to begin kind of learning a little bit more about you and your organization and kind of giving the audience a little bit of background. So do you mind sharing just a little bit more about the mission of Wilmington Alliance and what brings you to this work?
Sure. But before we do that, I want to thank you, Ashley. I want to thank the Bonterra team for inviting me for today's conversation. And I want to thank everyone who is joining us from all over the world because we know that all of us in the nonprofit sector are extremely busy right now. So I really am very appreciative of everyone taking an hour of the precious time to join us. So hopefully you'll get the value out of this conversation. That is Ashley's and mine joint goal. Wilmington Alliance. Ashley, in your intro, you mentioned the purpose of our organization. Wilmington Alliance is a nonprofit located in Wilmington, Delaware. We were established in late 2019 as a result of a merger between two organizations that, although they were created decades apart, both were established initially by the business and philanthropic leadership in our city to have a voice at the table and to be able to drive impactful projects, but also be part of a decision-making about things that really matter for the city. So Wilmington Alliance is a nonprofit that focuses on equitable economic mobility. Everything that we do it through the lens of closing the wealth gap in our city. We do this through three areas of work. The first one is workforce development. The second one is entrepreneur and small business support. And the last one is we use creative placemaking as a strategy. But what we do is we work specifically with the community in one neighborhood in Wilmington, Delaware, to help them reimagine physical spaces. So examples of that would be, we took over a brownfield and we turned it into a beautiful park and community garden. We took over a nuisance building property that was a problem for the community. And now it's a beautiful arts and healing center that brings artists and community together. So those three areas are intertwined for us because they work together to create a thriving community that offers opportunities and access for all in the city of Wilmington, Delaware.
Awesome. Thank you so much for giving everyone a little bit of background on Wilmington Alliance so that they can kind of better understand what you all do and your mission. So As we kind of get into more of like the meat and potatoes of our conversation, I guess another question that I'd love to kind of help kick us off here in a way is I'd love to learn more about what made you all focus on data collection and reporting from kind of the onset of the establishing, excuse me, of Wilmington Alliance.
Yep, yep. It's a great question because it was twofold, though. I'll start with the personal one, because I chose to, this is my sixth career, probably not the last one. And I am the inaugural CEO of Wilmington Alliance, who was actually running the process for executing the merger since late 2018, and then we established Wilmington Alliance. And I come from a for-profit background. So I would say that about 15 years of my professional career, I spent in financial services. And that's out of the our three sectors, right? It's very much focused on data and results and not duplicating efforts, but rather thinking about how can I partner with others? How can we make a bigger impact together? And so I brought sort of that way of being and thinking into this role. But also it is really what drove this is it's who created the organization. And I mentioned as well, it was a predominantly business and philanthropic community that came together to establish Wilmington Alliance. And the fact that if you think about those two groups of constituents, right, the business leaders and the philanthropic leaders, both live in a space of being results oriented. So it shouldn't be a surprise that when the board was working through what is the new mission, what is the mission and vision and values of the new organization, among our four values, which are equity, inclusion, collaboration, it's also being results oriented. And that's basically our promise to the community and the investors that Wilmington Alliance will be the organization that delivers on the promise, that delivers on results. And in order to be results driven, you have to be data driven, right? At least that's how I translated it.
Right. No, very true. Very true. I'm sure that the background of kind of where you guys merged from, like you said, helped kind of in that approach, but exactly that. Yeah, you got to have the data to prove the results. So,
Mhm, mhm.
to kind of segue into that, do you mind sharing with folks what your approach was in terms of like people and tools and timing and scope and just kind of walk us through that?
Yeah, yeah, happy to do so. And I'm hoping that that will provide some ease. I hear from a lot of my fellow ED CEOs in the nonprofit sector, I don't have funding, I don't know what to start, it seems very overwhelming, right? Well, let's start with the fact that when we launched Wilmington Alliance, we were doing everything in spreadsheets, like everybody was, right? Some folks do Google Sheets, we were already Microsoft Shop, so, Excel was the thing. And I was brand new to a nonprofit sector. So I had no idea what tools are used in a nonprofit space to track and report data. I knew what we were doing on the for-profit side of the house, but I didn't know any tools on the nonprofit space. So I personally, as the new leader of the organization, I had to do a lot of my own learning and knowledge seeking. So we launched in August of 2019. Well, we know what happened in March of 2020, right? We were figuring out what the heck we're going to be doing and how can we support with our partners, our city, and specifically what can we do for our business community and adult job seekers. And we were running on spreadsheets. But in the meantime, I was doing a lot of research and learning. And it was in January of 2021 that I was introduced to folks in National Fund for Workforce Solutions. And at that time, we already knew that the way we're going to be operating going forward, it's through this concept of collective impact model, that we're too small of a team. We're not going to be creating programs. What we're going to be doing is bringing partners together. And so I start asking a question. I'm like, so you all run workforce development collaboratives. Like, what do you use for data collection and reporting? How do you show that collective impact of multiple organizations coming together? And I still remember that because I asked that question on the chat during the webinar. And it was apricot, 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 apricot. And I was like, I like the fruit. I wonder if this product is as good as the fruit is. Honestly, I've never heard of it before. But immediately contacted, at that time, with Social Solutions, right? Contacted them, we had the demo, and I loved the product. I had no knowledge of it, nor did I have any capacity on my team. But thankfully, I had consultants working with us on the workforce development side. So we bought a license and we started using the product small. We first customized it only for our Second Chance Workforce Development Collaborative. We had multiple partners with it, and all of them were using the product, and that was our journey through 2021. While we were building this out and learning from it, I recognized as a leader that I need to figure out a long-term solution for administration and capacity building and knowledge building on my team. Again, I didn't know what that I didn't know. So I went to our higher ed partners, and I asked them if they have, among their seniors in college, if they have some really promising a data geek that is in the need of a paid internship, that is willing to come on board with me and be on this totally crazy, unpredictable, unplanned journey of learning together. What can we do with Apricot 360? How can we move the rest of our spreadsheets into the tool? How can we use the workflow, et cetera, et cetera? And I got really lucky because one of the deans had already a perfect candidate. So our intern started with us at beginning of 2022. And it was our intern and I that helped me actually shape a full-time position. And then in January of 23, we established a full-time role of data and impact management analyst who supports not only my entire organization, but also supports our partners to whom we make the access to Apricot 360 available for free as part of our MOUs and data sharing agreements. So we started small and we started totally not knowing. So it's totally okay.
No, that is great. Thank you for sharing. I think, like you said, starting off small is kind of critical so that you don't get overwhelmed. And, especially when you have staff that are coming from kind of various backgrounds of technological like understanding, I think it's really important to start as small as you can and work your way up. And it's not a race. So no, that is great. I love the idea of having an intern kind of help and kind of let them get that experience while they're still in school, while they're studying and helping you all out. That's a very good idea.
And I will tell you, I was very, as I am, that's sort of part of who I am. I'm very transparent and I'm very open about what I know, what I don't know. And in my conversations with deans, I said, like, listen, because the first thing is like, do you have a job description? I'm like, well, I have a paragraph. So I'll send you the paragraph, but the key thing is that this person needs to be willing to take that risk with me. The reward, a potential reward for taking that risk, is to be able to actually shape your own role.
Right.
And if anyone who's been for longer than 5 years, right, in a professional setting, we would very much welcome that, right? What we hate the most is somebody's job description and somebody's goals, and now you have to execute and you've never had any input into designing a job. I knew that if we're going to be creating a position, that person will be right there with me and the rest of the team shaping it. So
Right.
we love
No.
that. She stayed with us and she's now working for large financial institutions, which is exactly what I wanted her to have, that experience from going from a small, very nimble, very entrepreneurial, pivot on the moment nonprofit to a large financial institution. So she gets to kind of experience two sides, right, of deployment, sort of in thinking about data, and then
Right.
figuring out where she wants to go next.
Right. No, that's beautiful. That is, and like you said, don't we all want to just perfectly craft our own job to what we
Yep.
want to do, our capabilities? Yeah, definitely. But from kind of like when you're thinking about this from like a technical standpoint, because like we said, you want to start small for like your staff and what they might understand about technology, but thinking specifically from like a technical standpoint, what would you say was kind of like the most difficult part of the process to become more data driven? Like, was there a specific bridge that you think was more difficult for Wilmington Alliance to eventually cross?
Um, I think there were two. Um, the first one was really fully immersing ourselves and understanding that there is even more capability to the tool that we initially thought, or at least I'll say it to myself about myself. Like I knew that I can put the data in there. I knew that I could have a really amazing reports. I wanted efficiency. I didn't want to create PowerPoint slides all the time, right? And then cut and paste into the slides from Excel, right? I wanted to be able to create charts straight from there. Um, it was, it's when I realized that we could create workflows, that we could have forms. There's so many other things that we can use the tool for, um, that it was sort of that first bridge, right? Like learning about the tool. And then the second one was developing an actual knowledge and capacity on my team. Um, I think that's why we went, if you think about it, right? The year 2021, when we got the license, I was just hobbling along, right? Like learning, testing with this one program only, with support of the consultant, then bringing someone part-time as an intern, and then figuring out, okay, now we know what we're going to be doing with this, right? And trust me, we're still on the learning journey. Um, but it was those two, like the actual knowledge of technology itself and what it can do for us. And the second one was second bridge was building the capacity to take advantage of it.
Right, right. And I think so many folks on the line can probably relate to both of those bridges, and that, sometimes you think you have technology under your belt and then you have something new and you're like, maybe I don't know what's going on. And it doesn't
Mhm.
help sometimes that technology is ever changing and there's always new features. So it can definitely be a lot. So I think a lot of folks
Yeah,
on the line can definitely relate. But like you said about kind of building the capacity and knowledge of the people, not only yourself, but the people on your team, that's kind of what it all ultimately comes down to, right? The people that are involved. So, do you mind sharing with us what it looked like to kind of bring them along this journey and helping them become more data driven and kind of making a more data driven culture altogether within Wilmington?
yeah, yeah. That's a great question, because ultimately, it's really all about a changing of culture. And this was actually full disclosure. This was a really important learning for me as the new leader. Because again, I came into this space after decades, right? I was my last role. I was an executive at JP Morgan Chase, and I ran the function that was assessing controls for 9 lines of business. I lived like I am a Six Sigma black belt. For those of you who remember the times, the era of quality management and process design. So data is a thing for me. Um, and so I came to that space. I'm like, what do you mean you can't measure that? So first, we started with lots of philosophical questions and lots of well, philosophical conversations and me asking questions about what makes it hard to measure something, right? Um, and I was learning a lot about the challenges of collecting data in the communities that have been historically traditionally um, over-researched, measured, data collected, never received any benefit of that. So that was a big lesson for me to be sensitive. Um, I also was learning from members of my team about nuances of differences, for example, how you can measure something in a workforce space versus when you're supporting small businesses and entrepreneurs, right? There are some easier things you can measure, including the revenue growth over time. But how do you measure the well-being of the community, right? We're still struggling with it. Like I'll be the first one to say we are totally on the journey of much better impact measurement. We're not there where I know we can be because of our tools and now our knowledge and capacity. But the first lesson that I had to learn as a result of this journey was that I need to meet members of my team where they're at. So even though I really wanted to push the train of data really hard and really fast, for those of you who are on the East Coast, right, we have this Amtrak version of fast speed train called Acela, that shaves off 20 minutes of my ride between Wilmington, Delaware to New York City. I wanted to go even faster than Acela, maybe at the European train, since I'm Polish. But my team was like, let's have a conversation about what can we do today. And so I took a big pause in terms of my pushing harder and instead really listen to my team as to where data collection will support them, what is that they can do today, this year, what we should be targeting as a goal for next year. And we are at this point where I'm gonna quote one of my staff members who in our one-on-ones very often would say, I really hated this whole data thing. I was really ticked off that you kept pushing me on this. And now I'm having a conversation with our partners, with Mayor, and I can actually quote the information from our dashboard because we actually have a dashboard on our website. For all of you that actually shows impact on our programs. It's updated monthly, so it's open to the public. She goes like, I can actually speak in numbers and they love it. And so it takes time. And it was definitely a journey as well. And I think was most importantly, honestly, it was a journey for me
Yeah.
as
And I
the
think
CEO.
Right. And I think there's beauty in that journey of for you and like your leadership and learning that like, yeah, I got to meet people where they're at. And although I want to go, like you said, high speed rail, bullet train, unfortunately, that might not be where everyone's at. So we got to meet them where they're at. But I think that's a perfect segue. The experience you had with your teammate, sharing that like, hey, I'm able to speak in numbers and funders love it. But yeah, if you could share a little bit more about some of that and the process and that how that is experienced, improve the experience of your team having better data collection and what that has done for you all.
Yeah, it's giving us a real grounding in our work. Um, though our business development and marketing director, I mentioned we're a very small team, so everybody has sort of multiple hats, right? And she happened to be wearing two. Um, she will be the first one to say that she uses constantly our information, and it's really awesome. It saves her a lot of time. It gave her a lot of efficiency. Because now when she's putting together grant reports or she is submitting a grant report, she doesn't have to go through multiple spreadsheets, ask somebody for updates. She actually goes on our dashboard. And
Nice.
because she knows that the dashboard is connected to Apricot, and every month, because we collect data on monthly basis, After every month, the data is refreshed. She knows that I don't have to ask anyone. I don't have to, struggle, go through our SharePoint site, look for documents. I'm just going to go on our website and pull it from there and I'm done, right? So she loves it because it's a huge efficiency for her. For others who are maybe managing programs, it's really important for us to be able to, A, show to founders the results and numbers, but also we've made decisions to conclude programs based on the data.
Right.
And I think that's equally important, right? Use the data to launch an initiative because it's something that the community needs. At the same time, be very responsible steward of the funding that we receive, to be able to look at it critically and say, well, you know what? You, Mr. and Mrs. Founder, could be spending your dollars someplace else, and get a better return on your philanthropic investment. This is not the best program. So we've made decisions in ending programs using data as well.
Right. And that's super, I haven't heard much people kind of talk about it from that perspective of like, we use data to kind of see where we want to take things, but not necessarily where we might need to scale back. And not only for, like you said, funding integrity, but also the time and effort of your work and your colleagues' work of like, hey, this program, unfortunately, we've got the funding, it might not be working or it might not be doing what we think it should be doing. Like maybe it's time to scale back. So no, that's super interesting and insightful. And again, yeah, I haven't heard many people talk about it kind of from that lens.
Mhm.
And that kind of answers my question about like how you all are applying those learnings, and making more data driven decisions and improving programming. And I think that perfectly kind of answers it in that it allows you to see where you want to go, but also where you might need to scale back. And like you said, funders, they love data. They love to know where their money is going. They love to see the effect of their dollars. So having that data is, it's crucial for that. So I'd love to kind of segue into like what has better data management and reporting set up for, Wilmington Alliance for greater success with funders. And if you don't mind sharing, if you have any kind of tricks, excuse me, that's a hard one, tips and tricks for creating more compelling reports for funders.
Um, we have founders now who, because they know that we have this data collection and impact measurement discipline, and they also know because I'm very honest with them that we still on the journey. I said, we making improvements every year. There's additional things that we're beginning to measure and put in place. They'll come to us and say, I'm going to give you more money because I know that you tell me exactly what's happening with those dollars, right? And so having that trust now built, because I present them with data, not only that they can access it in the dashboard, but we also produce various charts reports for them pretty much on a monthly basis. Because I have two boards. I have executive board and I have board of investors. So with exception of 1 month in a year, there is a meeting in which I'm presenting our data. And we're doing this right now on a rolling 12 months basis. And we're beginning to prepare for doing some year-over-year comparison. Because remember, there are some programs that we started measuring in 2021, but others we didn't measure until like 22 or 23. So I want to have enough data to be able to show that. So that's one, right? Like it gives us the level of trust and credibility with founders that they will know exactly what results we're producing and how the money is being spent. So that's one. But two, I mentioned the fact that we've used data to conclude programs and then suggest moving funding, spend the dollars a different way, right? So the grant will conclude and I would do reporting and I would say, my recommendation is that we don't continue with this design. I'm proposing a different design, right? What do you think about that? And again, because we have some data we can share with founders. And so that allows us to make changes to programs that are much more connected with the need, but also connected with how the founders want to spend the money. Because in some cases, founders might be changing even their funding strategies every year.
Right.
Right? So how do you, the only way I know how to create a case for their continued help and investment is if I show them what's working, what's not working.
Right. Very true. And I think that transparency, not only does it help you all, but it also helps the funders and establishing that relationship of like, I know that I can get the best and accurate data from Wilmington Alliance, whether or not it's kind of looking more favorable or not, because there is that transparency
Yeah.
and providing recommendations on, hey, this isn't working, but let's move it here. So while we're kind of on the topic of funding, I feel like we can't mention funding and not acknowledge the bit of uncertainty that kind of surrounds funding and the funding environment for so many organizations right now. I'd love to know what your guys' approach is to taking and navigating this uncertainty.
Yeah. Yeah. My heart goes out to everyone. We started preparing last year. I'll be very honest. And so we started analyzing our programs through the lens of if we were to potentially receive fresh funding started with 2025. And full disclosure, we are the percentage of federal funding year over year, it's relatively small to my entire budget. I would say probably 30%. Yeah, 25, 30%, right? So I have some room to navigate, right? So I want to acknowledge that because I have in my community, I have executive directors, CEOs of organizations who entire budget comes through federal grants, and they don't have the same level of navigating that I could take advantage of. But we started preparing as a team last year and looking at how can we, so first of all, we look at all of our programs. And we looked at them through the lens of the highest return on investment. So if I'm going to have less funding, where do I want the dollar that I get? Where do I want that dollar to go to be able to provide the highest level of services in the community to the people that we are committed to serve? And so as a result of that analysis, we decided to do a little bit of a simplification of our programs, and we've scaled down some of the programs, and we moved our funding to the programs that actually were delivering the most benefit to, for example, in our entrepreneur and small business side of the house, we used to have 4 different initiatives, some of them with partners, and now going into 2025, we have 2 major initiatives with partners. Where we can deliver very similar services, but we can do that in the more impactful way. So that's one way that we've approached it, sort of through the lens of let's evaluate and simplify. And the second one is because some of our initiative involves for example, we provide wraparound services. Our workforce, I'll take it back, say it differently. Our workforce development work, we build ecosystems starting with employers to create pathways of employment for justice impacted residents in our communities. And we know through the data that individuals who are justice impacted need wraparound services support. So we've made a commitment that we're going to be supporting individuals once they're hired for 12 months from the day of hire. So we had to think through, looking at dollars that we allocated, we had to think through, okay, how many months of transportation vouchers can we provide? And how many months of housing vouchers can we provide? So we did a little bit of reshuffling of those dollars. The way because I'm a foodie, the way that I've been describing it to my partners, I said, listen, I still have the same budget. We're still going to do the work. But think of the grants, the monies as peanut butter in a jar. So once I open that jar of peanut butter in January of 2025, I am going to be spreading that peanut butter a little bit more thinly per slice of bread, because I need to think about how that's going to last me longer if I need to. So hopefully that makes sense. It made sense. It made sense to me and my partners, maybe because we love food and peanut butter.
No, I think that makes perfect sense. And I think, it's unfortunate that I'm sure so many folks on the line can relate to you have the resource, but you need to kind of make it last longer. So, like you
Yep.
said, I think that's a perfect analogy of kind of spreading that layer. You might have last year got a little thick on the peanut butter, but we got to
Mhm,
go,
mhm.
unfortunately, a little more thin this year. But no, thank you for sharing. And like I said earlier, I think a lot of folks on the line can relate to that feeling of uncertainty when it comes to funding, and it would be remiss of us not to have discussed it. So I'm definitely glad that we did. And I hope folks can take something from that and apply it to their organization this year as they approach funding. But we have covered a lot of ground today, Renata. But before we kind of get into the Q&A portion of today, do you have any final thoughts or wisdom that you'd like to share with some of the nonprofit leaders on the line today that are looking to improve how they use data to ultimately support their mission?
Yeah, good question. Well, number one, I'm not going to surprise anyone by saying start small. Start small, baby steps. We've always talked about let's crawl before we walk. We test with something. Also, if you don't have funding for it, it is I first of all, I'm a huge believer in pro bono work. And leveraging pro bono resources. So you may have an organization in your community like Wilmington Alliance that might have a license to a product, and you might actually potentially explore partnering with them. Maybe there is a programmatic partnership or data sharing partnership, but something that allows you to use a tool that otherwise you might not necessarily be able to afford in your budget, and then you're using it for free. All of our partners have access to our system for free. So that's another one. And when it comes to pro bono, every single bank, for those of you who don't know that, right? Not only that you could get pro bono teams from your higher educational institution, every higher ed that I know of as four-year and master's programs have capstone project. And so I use them all the time. I actually have a now capstone team that is going to be working with me in developing our advocacy priorities. They're all public policy majors. But you can tap in to the business colleges to get project support pro bono to help you think through the data. In addition, every single banking institution has pro bono teams. At JP Morgan Chase, the initiative is called Force for Good. As a nonprofit organization, you can contact your person at JP Morgan Chase. You can apply. It was actually a team from Chase that helped us to think through our next iteration of data. We didn't mention that, but we're going to be using Tableau in the future to link to Apricot 360, so then I don't have to produce a single chart in my life ever. Our board will have access to a website that they could just geek out on all the charts and create them real time. There is a nonprofit called Taproot Foundation. Taproot Foundation is a national nonprofit that matches professionals who seek volunteering experience with nonprofits that have projects. And those projects include data as well as website design, HR, and marketing. I used to volunteer for Taproot as well. So there are pro bono resources that you could use.
Awesome. No, thank you, Renata, so much for sharing some of those pro bono resources. I know, of course, especially as we talked about funding, we might be a little more strapped for cash this year. So looking out for avenues like that is going to be critical. And I think, I think, like you mentioned earlier with your intern, even though that was like a paid internship, but reaching out to your local college is always a great idea. There's always a lot of really eager young people that are willing to take on the work, willing to get that experience for, like you said, their capstone or just like for their own personal or professional development. So I think that those are really great tips for everyone on the line. But again, before we transition to Q&A, Renata, thank you so much for kind of going through this with me. And I really love this conversation and learning more about your guys' approach to data and what it's done for you all. And I just really appreciate your time this afternoon, Renata. But for folks on the line here, I did want to mention again, if you are interested in kind of learning more about Bonterra, learning more about some of the tools and services that we kind of talked about today, or just have a question about some of our tools and services, I'm going to launch another quick poll here. And please feel free to fill that out. Like I mentioned earlier, we're happy to connect you with one of our colleagues after we wrap up today. So while folks are filling that out, I want to give folks a little bit of time just to trickle any questions that they might have into the Q&A box, the chat. We're happy to take them as we kind of near the end of the session. But while we give folks time, if there aren't any questions, then we will wrap up a little early, but want to give folks a little bit of time to drop them in. And I'm seeing a lot of thanks in the chat and thanks. Yeah. Oh, that's wonderful. Someone else is a Tableau lover. So
I know, Heather is my fellow Tableau lover.
Amazing, amazing.
And Teddy has nice kind words for us. Renata, so great to hear how you're using data system. Super excited for you. Thank you, Teddy. Yep, it's a journey. It's a journey. I think that's the most important thing. Expecting that you will become an expert from day one, it's unrealistic. And I think it's we have to give each other and ourselves, starting with ourselves, a lot of grace. That and established a culture of learning institution. Like on my team, the only mistake you can make is not to try something.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It looks like we had a question come in from Tammy. Tammy asked, was the Wilmington Alliance 2023 impact report generated in Apricot and directly published onto the homepage/dashboard?
Yeah, so when you look on our dashboard, that's actually rolling impact every single month. So that includes 2023 data. We also produce a separate infographic. So we're in a process of finalizing the layout of 2024 impact. I'm not a huge fan of those, annual reports. When I had my own business, I was not a big fan of multi-page business plan. I only did one-page business model. I love logic models. That's kind of how I think. So you can definitely, when you look at our dashboard, you can see an impact from not only that includes 2023, but in addition, on our website, we have 2023 infographic, and as soon as we finalize layout of 24, it will be there as well.
Awesome. Awesome. It looks like we had another question come in from Michelle. She asked that their nonprofit is small, and so the numbers will be small. How do they ultimately still show that real impact, regardless of kind of those numbers being on the smaller side?
Small is great. I mean, think about it, right? Like in our workforce development side of the house, we launched a brand new collaborative in August of last year. And it's a pipeline for employment for justice impacted individuals into a healthcare system. Right now, we have only 2 individuals who've been hired, but they've been hired and then we supported them with services. And so the story then I then tell, right, is two individuals, but these individuals happen to also be members of the community. They also happen to be parents. And there is a ripple effect of the impact that this makes because now they have a full-time job. And that's a job that comes with a career, with benefits, and they can grow and build their own wealth. So there is a way to combine a data. I would never replace data with storytelling. I always think about how we bring it together because the qualitative has to come with the quantitative, that warm storytelling of somebody's life being transformed because our organization exists. So it's okay
Right.
if it's small. You're making a difference. And it's one person at a time. Or one pet,
Absolutely.
or one whatever, right?
Right. Absolutely. And I like what you mentioned about even with your program having only two participants. I think that allows you to get even deeper into their story and
Mhm.
the effects of their story because, you know, had it had hundreds, you wouldn't have the time, unfortunately,
Yep.
to go through and give that detail. So I think that's a beautiful approach of like, hey, use that smaller number to the advantage and really get into the story and the ripple effects of the effect of your program. So yeah, absolutely. It looks like we had another question come in from Debbie. And Debbie asked, can you give a few examples of the various data that you kind of record in chat and what that looks like?
Sure. So in our workforce space, actually, let me bring up a chart. In our workforce space, we track workforce jobs and skills outcomes. So specifically, we provide funding to other nonprofits that may have already a tool in place. For example, we have a partnership with a nonprofit that provides fines and fees that sometimes it's a barrier to getting an employment. And so that organization has the administrative component and they manage the fund. So they provide us a data as to how many individuals received support in fines and fees and how many dollars that amounts to on a monthly basis, how many the employee placements are. We track retention. So from the employment placements, we also show 1 month, 3 months, 6 months, and 12 months retention. We don't have a 12 months or 6 months yet, but we're approaching a 3 months. So that's, that's happening. It's on the way. We track demographics because Wilmington, it's such a small, although it's the largest city in Delaware, it's small administratively. Then we wanted to differentiate for our founders who are the percentage of Wilmington residents that we support in the work versus someone who might be living outside of Wilmington in the county or maybe in other part of the state. We track information about industry placements because there's specific industries that are high growth, high demand in Delaware. So we show that information. On the entrepreneurial and small business side, we obviously measuring how many businesses we support through training, how many of them we support, and dollars that we spend on one-on-one coaching. Then we have a back office support. So we have a list of vendors that we match businesses with, and we pay the vendor. I call it feeding two birds with one stone. Right? So both businesses benefit. So we track not only services provided by the dollars, and we also now tracking revenue growth. And we have a commitment that at least 75% of businesses that we work with will experience revenue growth within the first year of working with us. We were very intentional not set the target for revenue growth because I actually want to see it the first year. I want to see what is the story, right? What is data telling us? I don't want to just arbitrarily choose 10% growth or 15% growth if
Right.
the actual growth that we're seeing is 5%, right? So, and in the small, on the creative placemaking side, we tracking All our programs, we tracking how many programs we have, what the participation is. We also tracking program level satisfaction. And the new thing that we're putting in place starting this year is measuring the level of well-being. So it will be self-reported from our program participants, a level of improved health and well-being as a result of participating in our programs. So sort of building back the next level, right? We started with program satisfaction, but now I'm really interested is, so what? How is the health and well-being of individuals participating in our program getting better because we are offering yoga for sisters, or we offering painting art classes for youth, or Caribbean dance for women?
Right.
So hopefully that helps. Some of it is output, some of them it's impact.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I hope that that helped folks on the line who might be maybe a little confused on like where to start and what data is important and what data they should be collecting. Hopefully, they were able to kind of gather some ideas from that. But it looks like we had another question come in from Jory. Jory asked that Jory mentioned that they have 7 people on their staff. Are they too small to have someone that's specifically focused on improving their data collection and recording?
I have 5.
Oh, there you go. So 7 is not too small.
No, it's not. I have 5, and of those 5 is the full-time data and impact management analyst. Yeah.
Lovely, lovely. Monica asked, do you find that your funders are interested in qualitative data? And if so, how do you collect it and report it? Which I just mentioned kind of some of that more qualitative data. But what are your thoughts on the value of qualitative data stories and sharing that stories about your impact?
Oh, I love them. I love them, and I think at the end of the day, the first question that we need to ask is, what does this founder care about? And how do they want to have the information presented to them? I also have an honor to serve on the Federal Reserve Board of Governors Community Advisory Council. In that capacity, there are 15 of us across the country serving on a 3-year term. Our job is to come to DC and meet with Jerome Powell and the 6 other governors that basically define our economic life, and share with them qualitative data. That's all they want, because they already get all the research and numbers. So all they want is the stories from the field, from our communities, life stories, right? So knowing who your audience is, it's really important. Some of my founders, they really resonate with a story of small business that she started just running a hot dog cart. She started working with us. We offered her a membership in one of our kitchens that we're running out of churches. And now she's doing catering, and now she has a food truck, and she's thinking about, like, do I want to open a restaurant, right? And so can I tell the story about her in numbers? 100%. Right? It's the growth because it creates jobs. It's the growth because we're showing the investments that we've made with her. It's the growth because she can report increase in her revenue. But if you meet Nanette, it's really about her life story and why she started rolling this hot dog cart in Wilmington, Delaware in the first place, and why she's so passionate about creating jobs for high schoolers, because of her own story and her own kids. So I think the magic sauce is marrying the two. And the starting point is knowing what the founders would resonate. Some of my founders just want numbers. And others loved the human impact change story.
Right. Yeah, super important. I love that story. And I think, like you said, it's all about knowing your audience. You don't want to show up to a data-driven funder with stories and vice versa, because no one will leave happy, but having the opportunity to provide those stories, I think is crucial. So yeah, I love that story, and I appreciate that. Let's see, let's go through some questions here. Looks like we might have time for one more here, one or two more here. If you don't mind, Renata, kind of talking through a little more technical in terms of like newsletters and what that looks like for your organization. And I know that that task can be kind of time consuming with newsletters. So how do you all approach that using your data and Apricot, and what does that kind of look like for you guys?
We do quarterly email newsletter. We update folks on our programming, and we include information about, here's the link to a dashboard to see where we stand with, with impact on our programs. In addition, we also have very active social media. We are actively on 3 platforms: LinkedIn, Instagram, because we work with artistic community, right? A lot. So our creators hang out on Instagram, and then Facebook. So those 3, we're not doing anything else. It's plenty for us. In addition, I have a target, even a placeholder in my calendar every other Friday, to think through about what's going on in our work that might be worth sending an email. So it's my personal email from the CEO to our board of investors, about what we're doing. For example, I send an email that I'm doing this webinar. So if they have nonprofits that they serve on, they fund, or they serve on their boards, please send them a link if you think that that's useful for them to participate. I have in-person meetings with my founders as well throughout the year.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, Renata, it looks like we're about to hit time here, so want to be respectful of, I know, your busy schedule. But Renata, thank you again so much for your time. This was a super engaging and compelling conversation between you and I think I hope that folks left the call and are leaving the call feeling that as well. And I really appreciate you sharing kind of your expertise and your experience here. And another big thank you to you all, the audience, for sharing your afternoon or morning with us, and for your engagement with some really insightful questions and insightful chats. So we definitely appreciate that. That always makes for a great session. But with that, folks, we want to thank you, and we hope to see you at our next session.
And I included my email address for anyone who wants to reach out. Please do. Happy to bounce ideas, share. Isaac wants to partner, email me, we'll figure it out. It's Renata at WilmingtonAlliance.org.
Awesome. Wonderful. Thank you for sharing that, Renata. Hope folks you're able to capture that before we log off here. But again, I hope you all have a great rest of your afternoon or morning. And we hope to see you at the next session. So thank you all for joining us. And Renata, again, thank you for your time.
Thank you. And thank you, Ashley, for orchestrating all of this. I truly appreciate you. That was easy.
Yeah, it was a pleasure. It was a pleasure. Bye, everyone.